this meeting to order at 4:03. I feel like being targeted. Like in presence, we have me, we got you, we have Hal virtually, and yeah, let's jump into it.
Yeah, let's just name them for the record. So Lori, Lori Grimm, Hal Roddenberg, Jim Johnson, Rick Ufford Chase, Carter Finnegan, and we have community residents Ann Girella and Pam Latz.
Excellent, thanks. So we have done some resources. We have some general numbers for
I got
timeline.
some different numbers for you.
Oh, okay. Well,
So I wonder, Jim, do you have something that I should copy, scan, and send?
Yeah, I apologize to Hal because I assumed everybody was going to be here. but-
Right. So Hal, I'm going to go run and make a quick copy of this and send you an email in just a moment, okay? Is it just one
Is that the
page?
one that we
Yeah.
received on Wednesday?
No, this is new and different.
Oh.
So
Okay,
I think it's somewhere
it
near.
actually goes by month. I went back and talked with them yesterday and it goes out by month. So
Is there a reason the peasants are not getting it, Jim?
do you have a, I'll make a couple more copies. Do you have enough copies, Jim?
Yeah, thank you.
I got a copy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Door's locked. I'd say don't launch because I really want to be here for it, but maybe talk about anything else that seems important. Or give me 3 minutes.
You need to get in over there?
I got it here. I found my keys that I lost yesterday. It's a sign of my life coming back.
well, I apologize for being this giant talking head like out of 1980, the Apple commercial for 1984.
Yay. That was me last week, so.
I do that every day at work, so
As do I.
Teams.
Now I'm just trying to compare and
On
contrast.
How on
right?
Fridays, my worker, I really only joined the Fridays meeting because we wear hats. And we go online and then we answer questions like, what's your favorite movie? And, so. This is one of those things like for the last 4 years, I've been answering the question, what did you do yesterday? What did you do what do you plan to do today? And do you have any impediments? Every day for 4 years. Lots of fun.
It's predictable, but
Yes, yeah, president. Everybody does it. We work two week sprints, so.
yeah, not fair. Anyway, okay. All right. So I'll give.
Hold on just a second.
No rush, no.
Yeah, the one, and I do have a mechanical question, is when I shot my email out, is that, when there's a whole group tied in on an email thread like that, is that acceptable according to governmental affairs practices? Because I realized that I shot out a note out to everybody, so I didn't know what.
Yeah, there are no issues. The council has to worry about whether or not we're holding an open meeting law by accident. This group really doesn't need to worry about that. So,
Because it's just myself and Rick. There isn't a third member.
There's no
of the
third
table.
council member.
Yeah. So once it gets to that number, so you're good to reply all to us, and I really don't think there would be any penalty, or maybe just like a tisk if something were to happen. But do not worry. Let everybody know. I think that's a good way of communicating. So.
No public flogging at the bandstand or anything like that.
Well, I don't know.
so you should have it now, Hal. Can you see in your email if you got what I just sent you?
I will pull it up here real quick.
And Jim, do you have enough copies so we can give Paul a copy of the
Yep.
document here? Paul, this is what Jim just handed out to look at cash flow that we're looking at this afternoon.
Thank you, Jim.
Open this up.
Oh, traffic jam in Newport.
Yeah.
It's the train.
It was so cute.
You got it?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. This is
Okay, so Jim, you want to kind of talk us through this and then we'll see what questions come
Yeah,
up?
so this is a little different from the one you got before. The other one was, Hal was right, called it a summary, but Rick and I talked and we wanted it broken down by month, so I broke it down by every 2 weeks, starting Monday, Tuesday, whenever the 15th is. Okay, so all the revenue for each 2-week period is at the top, and the expenses are listed at the bottom, the ones that I know have to be paid on that, in between that 2-week period. Some of the tax revenue, could be more, it could be less. That's an educated guess on what we hope we get in the first 2 weeks. The bulk of it's received between May 1st and May 15th. Then it drops off. And same thing with the revenue, particularly the other, I'm done expenses now, excuse me, particularly the other expenses. That could be more and it could be less than the figures there because that's the best guess scenario, okay? But if you follow along, first of all, what we've got in the bank today is $328,000, okay? So if you add that into the tax revenue and other, and the difference between the revenue and the expenses is what we end up with, hopefully at the end of the next 2 weeks. So you transfer it back to the beginning of the next 2 weeks, and it carries on like that through there till you get to the end.
That's great.
And at the end, we're minus $1.4 million. And anybody got any questions? I'll try to answer them the best I could, but that's,
One,
it's not a, yeah.
this is so great. Jim, I do have a question. How does this make you feel? I mean, having it put together this way.
Well, I'll tell you, I went through a whole roll of tape, I can tell you that.
That's pretty
I've
long.
done this a half a dozen times till we got to this one. But I don't mind doing it, but it'd be a lot easier if they're like this, if never got a program to just punch numbers in. Otherwise everything's written out by hand and I gotta move everything to a spreadsheet.
Okay, so right now,
And
this isn't actually a spreadsheet.
Well, whatever you call it.
No, what I'm asking, no, I'm asking you, this isn't backed up by a spreadsheet with formulas or anything. This is just what you calculated and then
No,
put in to help us
there's
see it.
formulas to add that stuff.
Got it.
and subtract.
Okay.
There's formulas in there.
Okay.
The other thing is how, everybody is kind of trying on me to go through this because I've never done one before. I mean, I can tell you how much money we got and how much we need and how much we got left to spend, how much is in the bank, and that's about as far as it got. But so this is kind of educational to me.
No, I think this is one I have to say. When preparing a spreadsheet, one of the things I was taught is it should tell a story. This tells a story that we didn't get from the other one, so I appreciate all the work you guys did on it. And then if we can automate it, find ways to help you automate it and learn the tools, I think you guys will feel much more comfortable helping manage the city's resources and money. So thank you is what I'm getting at. And
Well, our first one was a trial by error. And four of them since then, this is what you wind up with.
So, go ahead, Lori. you go
Now,
first.
just a question. So, Jim, when that line for tax revenue, these are actual numbers based on
If you add that
the
whole thing
individual property
across,
taxes, right?
that's what we should be collecting from now until the
Okay.
May 15th. But the individual numbers in those,
It's just your best guess about when it
may
might
be
hit.
more, it may be
Right,
less. I can't-
right. Well, because, like there are some of us that pay our taxes once a year, not twice a year.
Yeah, I know, that's,
So, there's some of that.
yeah, I know. But what's left to collect
Yeah,
is after that has happened. Some people pay the whole year.
right.
And between you total that up in this total and the one we collected before should equal $11,087,000 and some odd cents. Well, there aren't any odd cents in that, so.
This is so helpful to me. So, Jim, does this, the thing I don't think I see here, but maybe I'm wrong, is any of the expense on the Causeway project. Is that in
I
here?
assume that was the USDA part.
So show me where does
Very
that?
last one down the bottom of the,
I see it as a bit.
I divided that, Rick. If you look on May 1 through 15, you see the 303.
Yeah, the northern
And
borders.
the other half is
I see, yep.
304. Now, that's not the whole project because according to, I talked with Frank and we think that the other 300,000, whatever it is, going to be next year. So that's not in here.
Oh, because, okay, let me just say out loud what I've been thinking, because that's different than this, and just see if you think I'm wrong. What I've understood is that there's an $875,000 price tag, or $65,000, whatever it is, price tag on the completion of the Causeway project, pretty much all of which is going to go to a contractor that we've already got the relationship with. It's all the contracts are signed. And of that roughly $70,000, $250,000 will be reimbursable by Northern Borders,
Yeah,
and $120,000 will be reimbursable by USDA, which means we front that money, but it will come back to us.
Yeah.
And the portion that's not reimbursable is a remaining $500,000 that I was thinking we had to put up sometime between now and July. Are you saying you think
Well,
that actually?
I think we're going to pay the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I talking with Frank and I discussed, I don't think we're going to get any reimbursement until next year.
Until the next fiscal year.
Next fiscal, yeah. When I say next year, I mean fiscal year.
Got it. But you only have 600,000 in this. 607,000
Yeah,
for that project, not the $875,000 I have in my head.
Because Frank thinks the X 275,000 is going to happen next year.
Got it.
And given the cuts already, do we seriously think we're going to get that money next year?
We have no indication
Yeah,
that those cuts are not, that those funds are not secure. At the moment, we've done some due diligence, and it appears that there's, certainly Northern Border Regional Commission doesn't appear to be at any kind of risk. And there's been no hint, unless you've heard something I haven't, Carter, there's been no hint that the USDA money's at risk at this point. So we're acting at the moment like it's real and praying that we're right.
That continues.
So these are gross outlay numbers, and there's going to be another $200,000 outlay fiscal, because is there any revenue associated with that project in Ham?
No.
Not this one. Not this fiscal year. We don't believe anyway. Or Frank doesn't.
Okay.
Put it that way.
And I support. I went over that grant, or I had a conversation with him today, and I haven't completely gone into the nitty gritty of, just due to time, of that grant agreement. But it is like a rolling reimbursement, but I still think it's not safe to bank on having anything in this fiscal year, like Jim's saying, but it can come back in pieces. So we don't have to totally
Wait
you know
until
what I
it's
mean?
all over.
Yeah, correct. So there's a little bit of relief, but it's still not going to affect this immediate fiscal year.
So this might be a helpful place to throw in a little bit of information from the conversation that Carter and I had with the Vermont Bond Bank, Municipal Bond Bank folks on Wednesday morning. Is that okay, Carter?
Yeah.
So we had two conversations on Wednesday. One I did with the auditors, which I talked about a little bit last night with the Water and Sewer Group. I'm not going to worry about that tonight. The bond bank, my first question to them was, is it possible for us to borrow at municipal bond bank rates money to do cash stabilization, in effect, right? To try and stabilize our cash position and then spread that money out in payments over the future, whether it's in water and sewer or operations budget or wherever we put it. And they basically said the answer to that question is no. We can't do that because municipalities, they can only loan capital expenditure money. They can't loan cash or operating expense money. That was the bad news. The good news, so they said, we think your strategy is sound. You're going to need to work with your lawyers on this, obviously, but you're just going to have to go to the banking industry to find the best rate you can to do that cash stabilization project and then project it over a period of time. But they did say there were a number of other things they could probably do to help us. One was that we can almost certainly arrange a $370,000 loan against the future USDA and Northern Border Regional Commission grants that we know are coming, and that they would be happy to work with us on that if we ask it. So to help us with cash flow through the end of the year, we could borrow that 370 and then turn around and pay it back when the grants come in. So that was, I thought, good news that I was pleased to
With
hear.
high interest or?
I don't know, it's the bond bank, so I suspect it would be low interest. We didn't even talk about the interest rate. I was just like, show me the cash. So that was the first one. And then they also said, Jim, that we owe them some money on the 1st of July for the current bond that they hold for us. I think it was 25,000. Is that right, Carter?
That's what I heard.
Could be, I've got it,
Okay.
it's in the audit, what we all.
Yeah, we need to look at that carefully.
I'm
And
sure there is one, but I'm not.
but they said they'd be happy. They can't renegotiate the term of that loan, the length or the terms of it, but that they would be happy to talk with us about a different payment schedule so that we don't have to do it right now if this is a crisis moment for us. So those were the two clear things they could do, and then they were going to look into a couple of other options that I don't fully really understand.
Yep.
Go ahead, Hal.
Since we're talking about line items, you know, and I look at certain things that I consider discretionary or not discretionary, and the payroll and benefits, not discretionary. What's VLCT?
That's an insurance payment that the invoice never got downstairs to pay. It was due for, I can't remember, it's overdue anyway.
I actually signed
So
it
we
and it
gotta
went off
pay that
today because we are overdue on insurance payments.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then as I'm looking at those, we got a construction letter of credit and then the NBUS. What's the impact of canceling? I mean, that's, in my opinion, I don't know if it's do we need to have this project done other than the fact that people want it? Or is it something that we can afford to cancel? What's the cancellation on doing a project?
So you're talking there about the construction line of credit in particular, is that right?
I don't know anything about the construction line of credit, what that is, but I'm talking about this project that's $800,000 of outlay. What does it cost us to cancel it? Is it less expensive?
Yeah, the short answer is I don't see a feasible strategy for canceling it because it's been on the books for so long and everything's up and ready to go. And if we cancel it now, it will almost certainly cost us exponentially more in the future.
We have
Okay.
bought materials for it.
Right.
And
Yeah, we bought the materials. They're sitting there. All we need to do is pull the trigger on it and get it done.
Okay, I just have to ask the question.
I appreciate it. And I'll just say about the line of credit that what that one is this was the water tower project, right, Jim?
Correct.
So what happened there was we borrowed money on a short-term line of credit. We've spent a whole bunch of money on the water tower. We got a reimbursement of $306,000 from what funding? I don't remember, ARPA or something.
Frank had,
Somebody somewhere paid us back $306,000 for their commitment, and that money needed to go directly to Pasumsic to pay down the line of credit. That was a term of the agreement that didn't happen, and therefore we now need to make that payment ASAP.
Okay.
yeah, and the other thing, we can't get any more money on that construction loan until that 306 is paid back.
Right, they won't let us borrow any more if we don't pay down the grant portion that we got.
I'm sorry, I thought that was a construction line of credit and that you couldn't re-up it. It needs to be the total amount and then it needs to be paid back, and there's no re-upping, as I understood it, of a construction line of credit. And that's what we talked about that because, let me remember, because the agreement on the loan that you could take with what we the citizens agreed to was you could borrow up to $5 million minus
Minus any grants.
any grants. And that probably came out to, I think with all the grants, something like, you could borrow 3 million something. So it seems to me that if you keep borrowing, paying down borrowing, you're going to go above the amount that you, the citizens agreed to you paying, and that someone told me, I think it was you, Lori, that that was a construction line of credit and it couldn't be paid up and down and paid up and down, but that you...
No, I think what you're talking about there is
Okay.
what I thought was my mistake last week, right? The line of credit that we've been using for cash flow.
Yeah, but I thought it applied to this.
It may also. I don't
I'm not
know.
aware of that.
But what I can say to you, Ann, is your critique is well-founded and listened to, and we certainly are not going to go back and borrow more than the voters have approved for that entire project, nor is that project slated to come in at more cost than was originally projected,
Okay.
from everything I've been told so far. So I don't think we're at risk there, and it's worth asking the question. I'll keep, when I'm sitting with Ellen Stanley, that question will be front and center.
Okay.
Okay.
We spent 1.4 million, I think, on that, ARPA funds on that project, and we borrowed 800,000. So you're at 2 million too, so theoretically we could borrow.
Right, there's still borrowing power left.
Still borrowing.
And what's impeding us from borrowing it is the fact that we didn't follow through on the commitment that when grant money came in, it had to be put back over there. So that's the problem we're trying to solve for at the moment. So if I read this correctly, Jim, and if your guesses are close, right, which everybody should hear me say, when I encouraged Jim into putting this thing on paper, I was very clear that we were not going to hold him to the guesses, right? Like all we can do is get as close as we can to what we think based on previous years. But if Jim is right about when taxes are going to hit and when expenses are going to hit, we are okay until the middle of June. Is that how you read it, y'all?
Yes, I'm just confirming Hal's back and we see you.
Oh, great. We lost you for a moment there, Hal.
I don't know what happened.
So, Hal, did you hear what I was just saying?
No, I apologize. I lost about 3 minutes there.
No problem. So I was just saying that if Jim's guesses are correct, and we all admit they're guesses, because we don't know when tax income's going to hit exactly or that kind of thing.
Well, they're educated.
They're educated guesses. That's right. That's right. It's not a wild ass guess. It's an educated guess. So if they're right, this is actually something of a relief to me because it tells me that we are not going to run out of money in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, which is what I was concerned about. That we're good. We should be okay to get through until mid-June, which buys us enough time to go think about some of the borrowing that we need to do for a long-term strategy to solve that $1.457 million problem at the end of Jim's chart here, right? So that when we start the new year, we've renegotiated that debt in the best possible terms and spread it out over time, and then figured out how to make sure that we're not going further into debt when we start the new year.
I think the only potential problem we'd have would be from now until the 1st of May. If that revenue doesn't come in as I hoped it does, because you've only got 246,000.
Of
So if
the
it comes in-
475 you're projecting.
Yeah, the 475 and the 50.
So what's our gap between 475 minus,
Well,
you've got 260?
If everything happens right then, you got 246 to carry over to the month of May.
All right, so I have some
Tax money will be coming in.
I have some good news from you, for you, which
Oh,
is
really?
that
Let's have it.
I received a phone call today from a community business person who is willing to pay their taxes sooner rather than later. And I think it probably represents about $150,000. So I think we're going to have another conversation. I wanted to have this conversation so that I had as much information as possible. I will call that person back on Monday and hopefully negotiate a payment of $150 by the end of next week.
Yeah.
So that will go a long way toward making sure your projection is not off for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's good news, and I'm hoping there's more.
More like that.
More people are willing to pay.
early on, and we might want to make some strategic. I didn't solicit that call in any way. It came to me as somebody who's watching and saying, I understand what y'all are trying to do, and I want to be helpful with this help, which I thought was a great offer. So it makes me think now that might actually be a helpful thing for us to do a little bit of work soliciting to say, are there other people out there in the community who are in a position to pay earlier? Though most of them are probably saying, I want to see what happens to the stock market.
Go down to Newport, pay your taxes early.
Pay your taxes early, yeah.
Yeah.
Pay your taxes to the capital of the Northeast Kingdom. Anyway, I thought that was really helpful. And it also says to me, people are watching. And Pam, the importance of these videos that you're putting up, I don't think can be overstated. I think it's really helping.
Does paying taxes in advance in any way hurt us for the future?
No,
I mean, because that money will not be available.
Yeah, it's all got to come in the next month and a half anyway.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah. This is so all that person is volunteering to do is to say, I think I can make that payment happen now instead of what I would normally do, which is wait till the end,
Sure.
right, and pay it off the last day.
Yeah.
So I got to go home and talk to my wife, see if she'll do the same thing.
Because the bulk of the taxes will come in the last week, from the 10th to the 15th.
Right,
Last week.
and if we get more of it up front, it doesn't hurt us. It'll only help the cash flow.
So I guess, I mean, one, that's awesome. The one, I'm looking 6 weeks out, because that's, in my opinion, tomorrow. It just feels that way.
Yep.
I'd like to understand what we might be able to do, and I know we're going to chew that here, but then what happens if we don't somehow, if we're at 1.4 and say, there's still $1 million out there, the line of credit has hit and we don't pay it? Because I mean, if we're looking at drop debt expenses, the 1.8 for the million letter of credit, that's the whole deficit right there, and then some. So what happens if we don't pay that letter of credit off immediately? Because, I think we need to make it publicly known that if we don't pay it, here's what happens. If we do pay it, do people lose jobs? What does that look like in those scenarios? So I'd love to hear, Rick, what you've been able to pull together and talk to the banks this week, but then I think we need to make it very public about what would happen if we don't address this as a community.
Yeah, well, so I can answer at least the first portion of that question, because I asked our banker directly, is this line of credit renegotiable at any level? And the answer is no. The line of credit has to be paid off by June 30th, and that current balance is 1.8 million. Now, the bank is also more than happy. This was Pasumsic, and I assume we could talk with other banks as well. They're more than happy to have a conversation with us about a longer term and durable solution to our cash problem, which is to say, if we start those conversations Monday and spend the next month working on negotiating an answer to that question, one thing I did hear is that at least at Pasumsic, it's going to demand a conversation with the board of directors, I think. We can't just negotiate this with our commercial lender because of the position we've created for ourselves. But I have some confidence that, particularly with our local banks, they'll be interested in trying to be supportive of us. So I think and I guess the second half of your question is just pure speculation, right, Hal? Which is, what happens if we don't pay it? My assessment is all of a sudden Newport goes from being a pretty decent risk to being a very poor risk because we're not meeting our obligation. And that's going to make it exponentially harder to borrow the money we need to borrow in the future, and the future could be very quick. So, my inclination is to go back to the bank, even without waiting for a council meeting to do it, and do a bunch of background work, and say, if the council were to follow this recommendation, and could we talk about what the terms would be and whether or not we would be approved for a note at the following levels, and see if we could just get some options on the table so that a week and a half from now when the council meets again, we have some numbers to put in front of them, and 5 days later, 6 days later, hopefully we can actually make some decisions.
Yeah, the big thing is, we don't pay that off on June 30, we won't get a line of credit for next year.
Right.
Which we need beginning July 1 to operate until taxes come in November.
Right, or we need to borrow
Or you need to borrow.
enough money so that we've reestablished our cash reserve, which I know sounds a little crazy, but actually maybe the most effective way out of this would be to just admit that given the nature of our cash flow, it makes sense to try and borrow not just the 1.457 or whatever it is, that Jim shows here, or whatever that number actually is when we get there, but to borrow enough so that we're actually putting some money in a cash reserve that can pay that money as we go instead of trying to do it off a line of credit again. Either way, frankly, I think we're going to pay interest on it, right? We're either going to borrow it at the LOC rate or we're going to borrow it at this renegotiated rate.
Yeah.
I'm seeing your wheels spin, Hal. I'm really interested in what's going on.
Yeah, I'm thinking of revenue side of things.
Uh-huh.
What are potential, because I see that as being a better solution than cutting people or projects of that nature. And this is being a new resident. I don't know if we get any revenue from slip fees, or if they're all private docks and slip fees. I don't know if we have any revenue sources. I'm assuming the Newport Country Club is on private land, and therefore it's all private revenue. I don't know if there's any public potential sources of revenue like the park, the RV park along the lake. And I'm not talking, none of these are $1 million solutions. I know that. None of these are 7-figure solutions. But are they small solutions that we can prove to lenders that we're doing everything we can to improve our cash position and our cash flow? So I don't know if there's any potential resources like that out there that, we can leverage.
I've got most of the campsites and the docks figured in here already. There won't be many until the 1st of July because they don't open up until the middle of May. So the bulk of your revenue comes from July up through September. So
Where's that revenue number in here? What kind of number is those like campsites and everything? What does that represent? How much is?
Well, it's in that 240 in June. The 240 figure in the revenue, other revenue.
Gotcha. So
It's in there. The corrections department owes us going to be around $95,000. They normally pay in June. We got resource officers we got to get reimbursed for. There's one other big one. Anyway, that's all in that figure in there.
yeah, I'd love to see if we can charge the state more for the prison and all those services.
Good luck.
Yeah, and I'll just say, part of our challenge here too is that we're dealing with a budget that's already been approved by the voters, right? So the 25-26 fiscal year, the budget's basically set. Now, if we can find a way to increase revenue, fabulous, but a whole lot of the commitments in that budget have already been negotiated.
Yeah.
And
So
another thing, Hal, once we begin July 1, we pay off this 1.4. We're going to be in a similar situation in September before taxes come in October. Because we're operating on borrowed money that whole time, basically.
yeah, no, that's why I'm saying.
So this happens every 6 months. Every 6 months.
We needed to show them that we're doing, here's how we're going to adjust. And let's get for real, everybody. Budgets are projections into the future. And any business I've been, we've always had to adjust the budget. There's, especially towards the end of the year, there's R2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if we have to pass something that says we're going to try and revise the budget and we're going to charge an extra 5% for certain services, that's a reality.
Right.
I'm not liking these ideas, but I got to put them out there.
Yep.
I have a small wrinkle to throw into this, and that is the charter governs some of budget changes, and the last part of the budget, I'm sorry, the last part of the charter says that when you, and it was written, you know, probably in 1920, and it basically says that your revenues that you are going to get, and I assume it's for the whole year, cannot be exceeded at any time. And then if you take a temporary loan, like this line of credit, it counts that as an expenditure for the purposes of how much expenditure you can have before you exceed your revenues. And when that situation arises, it says, well, first of all, it says the city council shall not exceed in expenditures except by express authority of the legal voters, the revenues for that year. When the expenditures exceed the revenue, it's got to go to the voters to see, it says, to consider what shall be done. And it specifically says that neither the mayor, the alderman, or basically the city treasurer, or any official shall issue warrants and sign them, period. Or they shall, it says, pay for them themselves. So any change in the budgetary amount that you want to get out of the citizens, it's got to go back to the citizens to vote for it. And if you want a loan that's not a line of credit, you've got to go back to the citizens for a vote. And if you get a line of credit, you're limited to how much you can spend, because the line, if you use the line of credit, then you can't spend more than the line of credit plus expenditures equal to the revenues for that year. That's my interpretation of this. It could be totally wrong. Everybody should, I think, read it. But it's something to govern the future of what you do as well.
Well, so I'll just say about that I've had initial conversation with the attorneys about it. I'll point out, first of all, that while that may be what the charter says, it's thoroughly been ignored for some considerable period of time. So while I appreciate the point you're making, I also recognize that we're dealing with a fairly extraordinary moment. My reading of it is that if we borrow money to stabilize our cash position, and we can do that without adjusting our tax rate for the coming year. In other words, if we can do that and basically come in on budget with the payments of the debt service that we've created, including those debt service payments in our budget, and we still come in basically on budget, then my judgment is I'm waiting for a final answer on this, but I think we can do that. And part of our challenge right now is we have 6 weeks to figure this out. So, and it takes a certain amount of time. I mean, my initial thought a week and a half ago was, let's see if we can combine whatever this is with the May 6th vote that we've got to do anyway. And the truth is, there's just there was no time. We don't have the time to figure it out and warn it. So we're talking about yet another election that we would have to go to. So I'm hopeful that we are going to find a solution that does not violate the charter, that allows us to borrow that money on the strength of a vote by council, so that we can get ourselves stabilized before the end of the year. Because if we put this off, as Hal points out, we're going to be we can't make our payments. We just can't make our debt payment. So while I appreciate the point you're making, Ann, and I want to be attentive to it, I also want to recognize that we are in an extraordinary condition here, and we got here by ignoring this, in my judgment. Because if we had been paying attention to this, we couldn't have run a $500,000 a year deficit between our whether it was an enterprise fund expenditure or an operation fund expenditure. It effectively was an operation fund expenditure because it all drew down the operating cash.
Yeah. In reality, we ignored all of the checks and balances that are
I think that's right.
And that's fraud.
Whatever. All I'm trying to do is figure out how we're going to move forward. Right? I hear you, and we do need to talk about this, and I did, in fact, have some conversation about this I don't yet have a satisfactory answer to the question.
Whoever wants to raise their hand to go and put the culprits in the pillory, go do it. I'm going to worry about what we have to do going forward right now, for lack of tact, which is one of my hallmarks. So I mean, really, at this point, the big thing is, what can the banks, there's a 1.457 projected short between what, so that we can renew some kind of line of credit. Because that's what it boils down to, is that we have to have enough cash in the bank that we can manage our debt load and we can service that future debt load. So really it boils down to, how do we gap that? There was one other project, Jim, that had been mentioned the other day about a vehicle for the city that was a 6-figure purchase. What was that? I don't know where that is. Some kind of truck.
There are two. One is immediate and one is a year down the road, probably a year and a half, maybe.
Oh, fire truck, one of them.
Well, there are three then. So there's one, which is a truck that we committed a year and a half ago to purchase, a dump truck. And that truck has now arrived, and we have to pay for it, and we're in the process of adding on the extras like the dump body and the plow, and I don't know exactly how all that works. And my understanding is that the first $100,000 roughly of the cost of that $200,000 truck has already been taken care of in the cost of, in the operating cost. And it may be that we have some money in one of those sinking funds, enough money to finish it. Tom and Frank and I are trying to figure that out. So there may be some committed funds that have been sitting at one side that we can finish that one with. Then we have a second issue, which is that in the fall, we're supposed to take possession of an $875,000 fire truck. And the bond that was approved for that fire truck was $800,000. And then without rehearsing the craziness that went on around that, eventually the final price tag on that truck was negotiated $75,000 higher than the initial thought was that it would cost. So when that truck shows up, we've got another $75,000 potential shortfall that we have not budgeted for at this point. I don't know exactly, we're gonna have to figure out where that money's gonna come from. Because we can go borrow the $800,000, but we can't borrow $875,000. And then there's a third, which is a longer term challenge, and that is that we have this truck called a Vactor truck, which basically vacuums out construction water and debris to make it safe for workers to work and to make it efficient for them to work. And it's used all the time. And it's nearing the end of its useful life, and it's going to be, right now, if we were to buy it tomorrow, it'd be about a $600,000 purchase, and we've got $160,000 set aside in a committed fund for that at the moment. So that's probably a year and a half to 2 years out that we've got to be thinking about. Those are the three vehicles I'm aware of.
So is there any way to raid the committed fund? I mean, that may have to be one of the things that we have to look at, is raiding any committed funds out there to put ourselves in a immediate cash position.
Yes, that's a very good question, and I think the answer to that question is, because those funds were committed by the council, they can be uncommitted by the council. So the council could make a decision that we're going to, in the short term, take the $160,000 out of the VAC fund, just to give an example, and spend it to finish the dump truck, right? Or take $100,000 out of that fund, knowing that we're creating a headache further down the road, but that it's the short-term answer to our problem, and maybe a better answer than borrowing money, because we have that money sitting there, right? It's Ann's Cadillac example from a couple of months ago. Can't remember exactly how you said it, right? But you don't put aside money to buy your Cadillac when you can't pay your food bill or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a useful. The answer is yes. Short answer is yes. We could theoretically do that.
Yeah, there are funds out there. We call them sinking funds. Basically, they're funds that money's been budgeted for over the years and put in there to save up, savings account, basically what it is. And there are several in there that we could borrow from, I guess, for lack of better words, to keep us afloat until Yeah, you got the back there, you got some water, you got water treatment facility funds, and you got water facility replacement funds. And money, there's money in there. I mean, like the water fund, there's 200,000 in there, but if you have to do that, that's gonna be millions of dollars, you know, $200,000 on a $2 or $3 million project isn't gonna.
And we can do that on the strength of a vote by council, if we choose.
I think that's something we need to understand. What is, we need to understand all of our resources.
I've got a list of those, I can get it and mark the ones I think can be tapped.
Well, and it sounds like it might be useful to ask one of our attorneys to join us next week and talk about the distinction between designated or restricted funds and committed funds and what exactly we can and can't do. So we could invite an attorney to come and talk with us next week if you want.
I think, Rick, I think the council uncommitted the committed funds.
Yeah.
Well, we uncommitted, no, what we did, if I understand it correctly, I made that vote, I participated in that vote.
Well,
My understanding is that we uncommitted the funds that had been committed by previous councils that were not put in sinking funds.
Okay.
We did not, as I understand it, do anything about the money that was sitting in the sinking funds themselves, which is what Hal's proposing here.
Well, the committed funds are different than the sinking funds.
Who's on first?
That's what I'm saying. I think it would be helpful to us to have someone come in and give us a clear explanation, because I'm not sure I even fully understand it at this point.
But before the lawyer comes in, if he's going to come in and talk to us like that, or speak with us, I should say, because we're going to pay for that individual's time no matter what. It'd be good if they just prepared a document that said, here's a definition of X, Y, and Z, so that we have that for reference versus just the spoken word of the subjects that we're going to have. So we have it to refer back to. We all have a common set of language versus our notes.
Can I just comment that not all committed funds that you would uncommit could be used for all purposes.
Right.
The water funds can only, if you've committed money in the water fund, can only be used for the purposes specified. You can uncommit them, but you've got to buy what they were in there for. Probably in the general fund, that's not true. And the same is true of the sewer fund. If it's in the sewer fund, it's got to be used for a sewer kind of purpose, and probably for the very purpose it was put in the fund for.
That's why we get lawyers to figure out how to massage those words.
If you look in the audit, it lists the committed funds, restricted funds. And
Yeah.
different kinds. There's only two restricted funds I know of: Walmart funds and the tennis court. Those are restricted.
I'm so glad we signed up for this fun, all.
Isn't it? Isn't it fun? I'll tell you what, I'm sleeping better because we're talking about it. Thank you.
I'm gonna sleep better tonight, and Rick's sleeping better tonight.
So I can ask the attorneys for some help with those definitions, and I think your advice that we don't need them here necessarily, we just need a written explanation to help us make sure we're interpreting those words correctly. I can ask for that. And on the strength of this committee's recommendation, I can go and begin a conversation, at least at Pasumsic, to say, as we look toward the end of the year and the payment of this line of credit, what are our options in terms of what products can you offer us, at what terms, and what's the length of time necessary to create that? Just exploring the possibilities at this stage.
Would it also be possible to, this is one of those things that, is it a limitation because Pasumsic is the current holder of that debt, that they cannot extend any further credit? Is it a possibility that if we speak to another bank like Community or M&T or one of those, because we're not currently carrying any debt with them, we can get credit from them in a larger amount, explaining the handled cash flow and other things? Because sometimes what can be a challenge, and we may have to look at banks possibly outside of the local area that, I don't know if there's more of a state, local, state bank that the state can recommend, would make a lot, because they're like, okay, we just see that you're creditworthy because you've been making your payments and you have this balloon payment at the end of the fiscal. Yeah, we're fine with giving you 2.5 or whatever like that. That could be something that we should investigate as well.
Okay.
And that could just be totally pipe dream thinking, but it could be the reality.
Yeah, we can certainly start those. It's on my mind that I don't think we want a conversation with just Pasumsic. One of the things that the folks at the bond bank said to Carter and myself and Jim on Wednesday morning was, there are banks out there that would probably be interested in this conversation with you. Don't just assume that you've got the right partner at the table already.
Bank of China's investing in infrastructure projects in Africa. I think they would be.
I'm out. You're not borrowing money from China.
They already own us.
I am looking for information from Farm Credit. There are, I don't know if it's through Farm Credit East, but I am aware that Farm Credit offers, depending on the bank and the association, does offer loans to municipalities for water and for certain things. But I have someone who works for Farm Credit East looking for the information for me. So.
That's great. And Hal, if you have ideas from any experience you've had about other places that we should turn outside of Newport, I'd love to hear them.
I wish they're way too old and out of date.
Okay.
Working for a large tobacco company where you have net negative receivables does not really create these kind of issues.
All right, I think I've got enough on this topic, and I have another topic that I'd love to put out there. Is there anything else before we move on to another area? So I was intrigued Friday last week with my ins and outs as I was driving with what I heard Cynthia say from NEMRIC about the possibility that we could turn to NEMRIC and sign a contract with them to help us with some of our the new financial systems or the improved financial systems we want to create, which would do a couple of things in my mind. It would allow us, it would take the pressure off having to hire somebody for the position that's currently open who comes in with the expertise sufficient to actually design that system. Then we could hire somebody who can learn how to manage and run that system without having to design it themselves. Mm-hmm. So that interested me. Yeah. And frankly, I can begin to see the path forward on hiring for that position, but I suspect that in spite of my desire to try and do it by the 1st of May, it's going to be more like the 1st of June in a best case scenario at this point. So it would allow us to start moving on that question sooner rather than later. So Cynthia sent a note. I can't remember if I sent it on to you all or not. I don't think I did, but she sent me an email on Monday morning and said that their normal, what I heard her saying and what she reiterated in her note is that what they would be offering to do is to have basically a person contracted remotely to help us design the system we want and figure out how to implement it with NEMRIC, to use NEMRIC to its fullest extent. And they recommend that they could do the work that we're talking about in about 100 hours. I think they gave a specific figure, about 96 hours spread out over the course of the next, I think it was a year. And they would charge us, their normal rate is $145 an hour. They said they'd be willing to do it for $110 an hour. So if you do the math, that's about a $10,000 cost to get somebody to come in and help us rethink and then redesign the way we're using NEMRIC to kind of get it running more efficiently so that we can get the reporting out of what we want and that kind of stuff.
I'm just going to tell you, if we can get somebody in here to help us with this for $10,000, we should probably do it.
Sounds like a pretty great deal to me too.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if this could be like MTAP. Like there's a couple of grants where I'm like, but I don't know.
Oh, like a grant that could help pay that, you're saying?
Yeah. So, but I still very much agree with Lori. Is like that's a pretty. But even if I could like make that disappear, I'll look into that because that's definitely something that sounds really similar to what I know other municipalities are gaming up for that. But let me do my research. Anyways. Pass the mic.
It's too good of a deal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The only thing I would ask is if they're going to propose it and we're going to honestly consider it, I want to see what they view the end result being as part of any proposal versus just a statement of work, like we're going to provide 110 hours or 196 hours at 110 an hour to do X, Y, and Z. Part of a proposal, which I'm sure we'd want to see, is what their anticipated end product is going to look like, even if it's just a mock-up, so that we're all on the same page with that. Because to the point of 10 grand, I mean, you can't sneeze at programming and get 10 grand worth of work.
And it should also, I would think, accommodate what Paul Tice was talking about as wanting with regard to the water, forming a water and sewer budget that had far more detail in it, so that we could make sense out of, you know, what the itemization was, and see if that wad of $100,000 was accounted for.
Well,
All right, so let me, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, and Paul shared with me that he knows someone who uses the NEMRIC system for that purpose. So, you know, we might have a couple of avenues. I mean, he seemed to understand that, or know someone that can help us with that piece.
And if it already exists, maybe we just like borrow it. Like this is more designing. My understanding is this is to design a system that's specific to Newport and what we're needing. But if somebody's already using a template or it's already set up like a program, then maybe we just like, hey, can we get a training on that?
Yeah.
Speaking of training, my 2 cents was around this contract, folding it into when we hire somebody, if it can incorporate like their training and onboarding. If
Yes,
this
good
person
question.
is willing to walk through and just get that person up to speed, that is going to help efficiency. And again, stretching that 10K, that would be incredible.
All right, so let me just read you the
Yeah.
two-way communication between Cynthia and myself, so you all know exactly what I asked and what she responded, okay? I said, Cynthia, thanks again for your time on Friday. We all agreed it was helpful. Here are a couple of questions. One, can you direct us to someone who can help us understand the pros and cons and the potential cost difference if we switch to NEMRIC Online from our current system, which is NEMRIC here in the building? And two, can you tell me with whom I should speak about the possibility of contracting for short-term remote support with our financial operations? I'm thinking it would need to include a review of whether and how we are making the most effective use of NEMRIC, generating reports that can help both our financial and fiscal practice task force and our council members to make decisions that will move us forward, establishing best practices for bookkeeping, coding, etc. with our department heads, and creating efficient financial operations practices to hand off to a new office administrator, existing staff in the treasurer's office, and an eventual new city manager. That's how I framed it. She wrote, good morning and thanks for your email. Regarding the cloud, the cost would be $750 setup and $20 per user per month to go online. The benefits are that you can access remotely without being in the office. Data and programs reside on a cloud server network not needed for NEMRIC programs. Remote support with NEMRIC support is much more efficient and easier. Ability to allow access to reports remotely by the audit firm, and you can use a two-factor authentication method of logging into the cloud, increasing security and identifiable access to the NEMRIC programs. Those are a few of the things I can think of off the top of my head. Then she said, regarding remote financial consulting support, we offer a bulk time agreement, $110 an hour, which is a reduction in our regular $145 per hour rate. The agreement is based on a promise to purchase 96 hours within a 1 year period. These hours can be used for all the things mentioned in your email and more. If your needs change, then we can shift gears and work on the things that needed at that time. If you choose to pay as you go, the rate is $145 per hour. Wow, which is to say we would have to front the $10,000 contract, effectively putting them on retainer. I missed that when I read it the first time. If we find that there's a need for on-site consultation, the rate for travel is half the rate being charged. I've consulted with Chip Stearns on our staff, and feel he might be the best fit for the type of consulting or support you would need. He is most familiar with your setup, great with custom reporting options, and our resident expert in utility billing, water, and sewer. I've copied him on this email as well. If you would like me to send a bulk time agreement, please let me know and I will create and send it to you. And then Chip chimed in and said, good morning. I want to bring to your attention, this is news to me, that Newport City is not signed on to the NEMRIC Disaster Recovery Agreement Program. It starts at $500 annually and establishes an encrypted full NEMRIC data backup sent to NEMRIC on a schedule, usually nightly, and NEMRIC maintains a copy for a period of 2 years. This can be done on your existing system and if you decide to use NEMRIC cloud services. So what he's basically saying is it's a security system available for $500 a year that we have not taken advantage of.
I think she said that last week.
I think she did mention it to us.
During the meeting, she mentioned that we don't have it.
I think I came in on the tail end of one of those when I got my signal back. So that's the complete correspondence I've had with her.
So we do back up every night downstairs.
No, I know,
I
but-
don't know if it's on the cloud or not.
No, it's not. And that's in fact their point. Their point is if the building floods because a pipe breaks upstairs, we lose all that data because it's here in the building and no backup. Right, so they're saying at the very least, if you're going to stay in your building, you ought to pay the $500 a year, and every night they'll back it up onto the cloud for us. And we're not currently doing that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing in there was, I mean, that's what we were selling in cloud services 20 years ago. It's pretty much just standard practice at this point. I mean, on-premise is the most secure functionality, but let's get for real, that it's also the most antiquated. If we do it on premise, did I hear that correctly? That they would be traveling here to do the programming. So we really, if we want to take advantage of it, we kind of have to go to cloud-based if we're going to take advantage of outside help. We don't really have a choice. Otherwise, we have to pay someone to drive to Newport and do everything. So a $10,000 job can become a $30,000 job.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Hal. I had not connected those dots in my own head yet. Honestly, given the turnover that we've had, there's a part of me that thinks that two-factor authentication in the cloud is a lot more secure for us actually at the end of the day anyway than what we're doing currently, which depends on who's got which passwords, and there's been a lot of shifting around on that.
Until recently, we had nothing that was backed up in the cloud because that was a big issue with emails and other website-based stuff. There was no backup.
I'd just like to make 2 points about what's been said. One is the 97 hours doesn't guarantee you completion of any particular project. So, if you wanted something, you might not get it, and you might have to pay for more hours to get the completion of that. And the second thing, and I'm not saying you shouldn't go with it, I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, has anyone, I'm not literate enough in that area at all, looked at the other programs that Cynthia said were sitting on the computer somewhere that other people have already done things with to see whether or not, hey, that may not fit all our needs, but it certainly takes care of A, B, C, and D, and we can have that for free.
So I want to talk about that for a moment. It's absolutely true that we could be using NEMRIC right now more effectively with the help with some of those templates. And in effect, that's kind of what you were saying too, Carter.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Having said that, based on the conversations I've been having the last couple of weeks with Hal and Jim and Paul Tice, it just seems to me that we are long overdue for an overhaul of how we manage our financial record keeping and our budgeting and accounting. And this seems to me to be the most cost-effective way I can imagine doing it, taking into account, Hal, that I think you're right, that we would want to go back to them and say, okay, in this bulk agreement, can we list the outcomes that we think we can reasonably expect in this number of hours? To at least get a ballpark on what we think what the output is. I just listened to the book Abundance which is a huge critique of the fact that the Democratic Party for years has said that success is however much money we throw at a problem, not whatever the outcome is we get as a result of it, right? And that's, I think, the point that we're making here. We want to know what we're going to get in the process. But I don't know a faster, cheaper way to reform our bookkeeping, and I didn't know anything about this until a week ago when Cynthia mentioned it as a possibility.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree, because as you were reading and listening to this conversation, I'm thinking the same thing. But we could sit here and, you know, open everything on their website, look at all their stuff, but what's his name, Chip? He's gonna know it. And he's gonna be able to say it, you know, and know whether or not, like, things can be combined, or, you know, what's already out there that we're not using. I mean, that's what she said last week, and we've already said. That's just my opinion. We've got a resource. Sometimes you have to spend the money to get to a place where you can put things back in order.
Yeah.
So I did take some time and go through a bunch of the different links and reports that were available on NEMRIC versus hanging pictures on my wall, which probably, that was another argument delayed. So that's why I think we need to have them, if we can show them what Jim has prepared, say we want something that's going to look more like this. This is a guidance. What can you provide us inside that 96-hour window and things of that nature, and where can we take it? It's a good communication so that we can have that project plan. They can give us a good scope of statement of work that we can accomplish this in X number of hours, and then mentally just tack some time onto it. The one thing that I was kind of shocked by from the NEMRIC page, unless I missed it, they don't have like a cash flow report. When I went through the stuff, and there's a lot of really cool things that I don't understand about, you know, city administration, accounting and whatnot, which, you know, will probably be very helpful. But yeah, I didn't see anything like what we're looking for.
Yep, I agree. And when we asked Cynthia that direct question last week, I actually sat where I had a cell phone long enough for that question, right? And you know, what I heard her saying was, right, it doesn't exist in NEMRIC, which I agree, Hal, it just totally shocks me after 40 years of nonprofit work that municipalities don't depend every day on this. And what she said was, not that no one can do it, it's that the cities that are concerned about it have developed a system by which they download data into a spreadsheet on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly or whatever, and then work with their department heads to go through and do the adjustments to it. And that's how they come up with their cash flow projection.
Right.
Which seems crazy to me, but apparently is common practice, at least here in Vermont.
Right. But still, if we were to put these systems in place, that outside analysis could almost be like let's do this, let's enter in these numbers. If we have the correct organization and their
of the data,
yeah. Then doing that outside analysis isn't this gargantuan mountain that's undoable. You know, it's more like, oh, just protocol, or like time to do this, like a little bit more straightforward. Yeah, because we could invest a lot of time researching what system could do all of this, but that's going to have a much higher price tag. It's going to be much longer timeline to actually implement that and then get the results we're wanting, versus, well, we have a little time, we've got a little breathing room, we can get some ducks in a row and get this closer to working. Because I mean, again, I think it really does speak that most municipalities in Vermont use NEMRIC, and
all is what I heard you say.
All, yeah.
Every municipality in the state of Vermont.
Right. So
boggles my mind.
Right. So
there's that lack of imagination or laziness.
Maybe, but I'm not sure right now is the moment for Newport to try and forge a new path.
Yeah.
Well, it's quite expensive to. That's why I'm going at what my company's doing, but you know, for $10,000 just for the consultation of this.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Like Hal said earlier, just a programming thing. You know, for us, it's $10,000 for them to like change a code. you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
this is nothing. So
what about this, y'all? I should say, I've spent a significant amount of time on the phone with each of the other council members individually this week, so that none of them are being left behind on the conversations we've had with the auditors and with the bond bank and with NEMRIC. So I'm trying to bring everybody along so that none of this will be a shock to them a week and a half or 2 weeks from now when we talk about it. And I think on the strength of a recommendation from this group, it seems to me that we could, in addition to what we talked about in terms of exploring loan options, so that's one, right? We get out and Jim and I start having conversations with Pasumsic and CNB and maybe other banks like Farm Credit or wherever, right? And just see what's out there and learn the landscape. Two, that we prepare a document that will help the council make a decision at our next meeting, which is a week from Monday, regarding converting to NEMRIC Online, which is a very minimal cost. It will disappear into our budget. It really, there's no appreciable cost to it. And just go ahead and do that, because it would be then, and then we would prepare, I could reach out to Cynthia and Chip on Monday and say, could you prepare a bulk agreement with these following considerations in mind for our task force's consideration on Friday afternoon next week? And then if the task force is in agreement, we can take whatever pieces of that stuff that we want to the council meeting on Monday night, the 20, whatever that is, first, I think, right?
What would Jim or Stacy think about that, given that they're the
I was
ones
just
who are
going
going
to
to have
say,
the joy of
it would
working
be
with
helpful
them?
if you talk to little girls about that. I mean, they're the computer wizards. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm truthful. I can do what I got to do, but they're the ones that know what's going on. That being said, Stacy's starts on vacation starting Wednesday. She's gone for a week and a half. Robin, more than capable of getting any information or opinions you want.
Fair enough.
And at the same time, we should talk to Blowen. Is that his name?
Dennis, he's our
Dennis?
IT guy.
Because if we're going online, we need to make sure that we've got the bandwidth to.
The tech support.
The tech support and the bandwidth to do that.
I've had initial conversations with Dennis because I saw this coming a couple of weeks ago, and his initial inclination was there shouldn't be any problem from a tech point of view. But it's absolutely something we would need to talk with him about.
We're not doing video files and stuff like that.
Right, it's not
Right.
huge. We've got fast internet speed in this building most of the time.
Yeah,
Just
well.
because, this is a matter of pretty biblical proportions for Newport, it seems like, what's going on. I hate for something like this to become a shock or surprise. And to some earlier points, I don't want to be pilloried in any way, shape, or form on the public green. How do we communicate this to everybody in general through newspapers, through public announcements? I mean, I don't know if we have an option to just put a newsletter into everybody's mailbox in some way of saying, hey, we need to inform you about what's going on with the finances of Newport and what we're trying to do, because I think one of the most challenging things will be not having communication to everybody, or at least awareness, and then all of a sudden everyone feels blindsided.
That's a very good point. There is a pretty effective communications network that Pam sits at the nexus of in many ways in this community. So, if I put out, first of all, I have access because our former mayor established it, that where I can write a note from the desk of the mayor kind of note in the Express anytime. And honestly, it's just been a function of how unbelievably busy I've been that I haven't tried to do one yet. But I think I did one the first week and I haven't done one since. But I can do a note in that article that Pam can then pick up and run on Newport Rocks for us, and that gets remarkable attention. And the other thing we can do is I have started this Newport Notes with Rick NEK-TV thing that I would certainly intend to do coverage there. And Pam, I wonder if it might be interesting, if you're willing, to use your show at some point with people like Hal and Paul to talk about some of the ins and outs of this stuff, just to get other voices and talking heads so that I'm not the only one interpreting what's going on.
Right.
right?
Because you need to do some separating of your assorted heads.
Of my assorted heads. Well, yeah, I mean,
You do.
I think I've been working it pretty carefully, actually. I mean, I don't think you see many places where I'm stepping over that line.
It doesn't matter whether you're stepping over it or not, you're not being seen as separate.
Fair enough. But my point stands. It's appropriate for my Newport notes with Rick for me to try and interpret some of this, but it can only help for Pam and others in the community who have access to these kinds of outlets
Yeah.
to help us with it.
I'm happy to do that.
Great.
And unfortunately, we've already been through Newport is bankrupt. And we need to go at this remembering that in the last, 4 or 5 months,
Right.
it has been very widely broadcast that Newport is absolutely bankrupt.
Right, so our message here
we need
is
to-
we are dealing with the following challenges in these ways, right? Here are the proactive steps that we're taking as a community, as a council, and the 2 task forces advising the council to try and dig our way out of this.
But I think it's really important to define what that word means.
That's
because
right.
that word,
That's right.
just because you might not have enough money to pay the bills does not make you bankrupt. Newport has assets galore that exceed any of the expenses that you now have. And so that word scares people, and that word is not accurately being used, I think.
You're absolutely right.
Somebody
That's correct.
can assure people that that is not so, and then that we're dealing with this other issue, and this is how we're dealing with it.
Yeah, so the language
I was just gonna say beforehand that the city's got far more assets than does liabilities.
Right.
Far.
So the language we're using, and I've been very careful about this language, is to talk about cash flow crisis, short-term cash flow crisis, and long-term strategies to make sure that we return to fiscal health. And I have talked about deficit spending, consistent deficit spending, that we are working to reverse, right? So those are the kinds of languages I think the kinds of word that we want to use for this. And I was in an interview last week where the reporter tried to put the words bankrupt in my mouth, and I stopped that person and said, absolutely not. The city's financial condition is fine, and we are being responsible by trying to make sure that it gets better, not worse.
I also think that it's really hit the fan during this administration, and that some people think, oh well, if it's now, it's caused by now. And it really, I know people don't want to go back in history at all, but it really should be pointed out that this was a long time developing, and through the last administration and this administration, we're beginning to tackle it.
Yes.
It was ignored and it was exacerbated previously.
Agreed.
Right, and we're shifting practices and our policies in this way. I think it would be smart to get a little bit more definitive before, depending on how you want to do if you want to utilize your column to inform people, I'm not stopping that. But it'd be really helpful to have this show when we're saying, these are our actual steps. This is maybe explaining what is going to be at the council, or maybe right after following up.
I think that's right.
Because I think, just to your point, is like, there needs to be some accountability and like clear redirection of where we're going and why it's different, and not just we're doing things,
Right.
period. I think there needs to be more follow through.
And it's absolutely right. I mean, it's been going on for several years, and people have been made aware of that, but chose to ignore it.
Okay. Hal, anything else on your mind tonight?
No, I just think you all just described exactly why I would not be the right spokesman.
Actually, Hal, you might be, and you and I need to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, actually, I think there could be some real value, Hal, in your helping to kind of describe the current situation. In part because most of the rest of us are talking heads that people are used to hearing from.
Amen.
Yep.
So I think having some new people in the mix could be really healthy. And I'm really grateful for your willingness to do this much. I'm not assuming anything about what else you might be willing to do.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else on the agenda? I apologize because I'm I have to get ready to take my parents to dinner here tonight.
Really?
That sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
If you don't come back, we'll know that we functionally scared you off with the threat of a NEK-TV.
No, this, I mean, and I think all of us need to just realize that, Jim, we're putting you to task, and I truly appreciate it, and the other people in the office, and ideally, there's gonna be some really cool tools out of some of these projects that will make you guys more insightful and in a place that these are meetings that you get to run versus us coming in and asking questions. You're gonna say like, you guys need to tell us how to fix this problem. That's my ultimate goal here, is that the people in the clerk's office and the finance office can say, hey guys, we see the problem 3, 6, 12, 18 months down the road. How do we fix it? You guys are the citizenry. So thank you for putting up with our gumption.
Well, we're there to do whatever we can to help it.
Thank you. Well said.
Just one thing that came back to my mind, when we're talking with NEMRIC about the cloud, is there a, this is gonna sound strange, is there a visual difference in what they see today versus what they'll see?
It's a good question, because QuickBooks is different online and on desktop.
Because that can be, even, it can be overcome, but it can be disorienting at first.
Well, that's where
Tell me about it, because if I get on the computer and something looked different to me than I'm used to doing,
You're just stuck.
one of the girls, hey,
Right.
wait a minute, hey, you gotta tell me what this is.
Yeah.
Right.
And
It's a good
so,
question.
So knowing that up front, it's really important to know.
Yeah.
Are things in different places? Is it the same? I think she said it's the same. I did take some notes, but she was talking and taking notes fast, so.
Do you want to be copied, maybe you and I together on the NEMRIC conversation, just to have another set of eyes on it? Is that all right? Carter, I'm happy to include you too if you want or not.
Sure. No, I did find the email that you had sent, and then she must have just replied to you, which is fair. And
Okay,
so,
right, I copied you on that. That's what I thought.
Yeah, so you did, and that's okay. Feel free to loop me in on things.
All right, so I'll copy Lori and Carter
Great, Lori would be a good.
on those communications, which I'll do on Monday. Okay?
Once you go to the cloud, are you stuck with the cloud forever? You have to keep financing storage on the cloud.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you stop, you lose it all.
Yes.
Yeah,
Or you bring it back in-house. You wouldn't just stop, you would have to bring it back in-house.
Do you store in-house all along as well as on the cloud?
Not typically.
No,
But can you,
It-
is a good question. Can you?
you can, but I mean, at the end of the day, when you're dealing with cloud-based software, it actually, it chips away every month, but if you were then, like, say our servers and PCs here in the office, you can have less expensive hardware in-house and less of it
Sure.
is that capital investment and then become software as a service type of model. It's a yin-yang
Right.
situation, but the reality is to have a hosted solution, I mean, outside of the Department of Defense for like nuclear missile silos, there are not good arguments to have on-premise hosted software for much of anything.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're done, yes?
Yep.
Thank you, Hal. Have a great dinner with your folks.
Yeah.
See y'all.
Okay, take care.
Bye.